Yeah. Well, isn't this exciting? I must admit, this is a bit of a trip down memory lane with a great story. My good friend Jay is with me, former planner, entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. Welcome, Jay, and thanks for your time. We just walked down Ruthven Street, the main street of Toowoomba here, which is a wonderful kind of streetscape in its own right. Mini Melbourne, that's what we called it many years ago. And somebody recently, might be the guy holding the camera, said it's now Mini Melbourne on the mountain. But it's a wonderful vibe, but it's old school. And then we turn into this alleyway where we'll find a ground up cafe, which Jay was one of the founders and I'd say the prime mover of. And you can see that we have a completely different part of Toowoomba here. And today we just want to tell that story, and Jay's going to lead us through what it was like to do this. So Jay, here we are sitting down at your former empire of Ground Up, we'll have a coffee later. I'll just make a point that this was still the only 5 Vann star rated coffee place in Australia or the world for that matter. I'd really love for us to just chat about the story of how you came to do this. And as we walked in here and turned that corner and this vista opened up with the wall art and the graffiti and everything, none of that was here when you started, was it?
That's right, yeah. The story begins actually with working as a planner for Toowoomba Council at the end of this lane.
That's right, yeah.
Where there is now a mega shopping centre.
For our good friend Di Curry back in the day.
Yeah, that's right. Di was generous enough to give me a job out of university.
Yeah.
And our office was a bit of a rabbit warren in a car park at the end of the laneway here. And Di put me in a position to help with the city centre master plan for Toowoomba at the time. This is 2011, 2012.
Right.
Showing our age.
Yeah, well, tell me about it, mate. Yeah.
And I found it a little bit frustrating working on that document because as a planner, especially fresh-eyed out of uni, you really are so optimistic about what you can achieve, and you really want great outcomes. And I think at heart, planners do want great outcomes.
Yeah. And
I just felt a little bit frustrated that we were working on these documents and they were kind of sitting on a shelf, not really doing much in terms of real-world implementation. And by chance, I would walk through this laneway every day to go from our office to, I think it was called the Gladstone, to get a pub lunch most lunchtimes. And so I spent...
Classic old school country town, hey?
The steak pub for $10. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time walking up and down this laneway, and it was derelict, as laneways kind of were in this town and in a lot of towns around the country. And I don't know, I just saw that there was a boarded up doorway literally right there. That awning was there, and the stairs were there, but that sort of opening was boarded up, it was closed. And I thought, it'd be really cool if this was a cafe or some kind of food venue to bring a bit of life to this laneway. And that was kind of the start of the journey.
And so you were moonlighting out of your day job with a couple of mates, as I recall, another former planner back in the day, and you guys, I remember coming in here and you were swinging hammers and kind of doing a lot of the work yourselves. So it really was, which is one of the reasons why I love the name Ground Up, because this place was built from the ground up by people who were part of the local scene. But can you tell us a bit more about that stage of this?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to mention that this was not me, it was me and 2 mates, and Ryan and Nathan, and the 3 of us were great mates and decided we should take a punt and give it a go. And so that fateful lunchtime when I walked through this laneway and saw that boarded up and had the brainwave, I actually walked around the front, knocked on the door, and it was a travel agent, and I asked, what's happening in that back room there? And she walked me around, and it was their old storage room.
Right.
And it was pretty empty, there was nothing in there, and I just asked her, would you sublease this to me? And she said, sure. And I said, how much would it cost to sublease this off you? And she said, $100 a week. I said, okay, let's do it. And so committing to that kind of a lease was very low risk, but we didn't have the funds to actually turn the place into a cafe. so we just required our own labour to get things done. And fortunately, Ryan was an electrician.
Yeah, that's right.
And being very handy, he could get a lot of the work done, and he could guide Nathan and I, who didn't know how to swing a hammer, on what to do.
Yeah.
And so it was 3 or 4 months of go to work, do the day job, come straight here, stay here till 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and then back to and we just did that.
Was it exciting? Were you all energised by that?
So exciting.
Yeah.
And it felt good as a planner whose day job was sitting behind a desk writing reports. It felt good to spend 5 or 6 hours physically doing something and walk away seeing like the actual result of your work.
Yeah.
And that is just a micro version of what happened when we actually did ground up and saw it succeed over time.
Yeah.
It was nice to physically put in effort and see a physical result in the real world.
And of course, it's not just the cafe, is it? I mean, you enliven this laneway, the first laneway that people didn't think of as a backwater that was a problem. You turned it into something that was a real asset to the city. So what's the story with all the graffiti? And, you know, did that predate, or was that after you opened, or how did that all?
No, this laneway was really quite derelict, and it was all exposed brick when we first came down.
You know,
there was a little bit of old graffiti on this wall that was more like tagging style than art.
yeah.
We were sort of members of the community, and so we had a social life here and we had friends here, and so we had an understanding of what we thought would work and be good,
Yep.
people would like.
That was your research.
Yeah,
Yes.
just being a member of the vibe. We went off the vibes. And so, yeah, we had mates who were street artists, and we wanted the laneway to be more beautiful.
Yeah.
And so that's how it first started, was just asking mates to do art on the walls, which then morphed into, again, a bit of a microcosm of ground up. It morphed into people seeing that was a thing, who themselves had passion in art, going and starting a street art festival, which then turned into like quite a big movement in this town.
Wow. Yeah. So you know, the story, the thing that has fascinated me and gave me such joy as a planner to see young people having a crack, but you, with your context of understanding the planning and also working on the planning for the city centre, you know, you must take great joy in realising that what you did here was almost the start of the rebirth of urbanity in downtown. Am I gilding the lily, or is that true?
Yeah, you're definitely giving me
That's how I saw it. But it made a big contribution. It made people understand that, alleyways can be fun. Cafes can be fun. Places where you can have, since we've been walking around with you this morning, every second person sort of says, oh, g'day, because you obviously knew them when they were patrons here. You know, it's a tremendous contribution to the urban fabric, but it's also something which was in its own right, a relatively small piece of the jigsaw, but the first piece of the jigsaw that has seen downtown Toowoomba become a much more buzzy sort of place than it was when you guys started.
Yeah, I think it speaks to this interesting tug of war between planning and grassroots action. I think planners want great outcomes, and they often have really good perception of what great outcomes would be. So, for example, at the time, in the City Centre Master Plan, we were working on a laneway revitalisation strategy before anyone in the community was talking about laneway revitalisation.
Right.
So
right.
Their perception of what was going to be good for the town centre was spot on. The tool that they were using to try and achieve that was a document, a policy document. And so this kind of speaks to how important it is to actually be a member of the community in which you're trying to achieve good outcomes.
Yep.
And to understand how to work in that community and know that if you can do something actually real, even if it's small, and it works, naturally other people around you are going to see that and they're going to feed off that and they're going to go and multiply that effect through the town. And that's what's happened here. We took a punt. It was a small punt, but we took the punt. People saw that it worked, and then all of a sudden everyone was looking at all the laneways in town thinking, where could I do this? Where are the other laneways in town where I could try and do something? That just speaks to the benefits of grassroots action and the impact that it can have.
And the two sides of the coin, you know, is like having clarity in your planning policy is really important, to know where you want to take your place or your community and the future that you aspire to. But then the other side of the coin is the actors who will actually help deliver that, which is, you were a key piece here. And, as I think I mentioned to you earlier, when I was in the Middle Ages in local government planning and realising that we needed to understand the economic development piece as well as the planning piece to enable delivery. And I learnt the mantra of the 4 S's, that you need to do something soon, small, smart and successful. And this is an absolute big tick in all of those boxes. It was something that, as you say, relatively small and while low risk. I mean, you might have been paying $100 a week, but you were putting 6 hours a night into it for months. It was a big investment of energy and effort. But look at the knock-on effect it's had. So I think that's the planning story here, and the delight about this has always been, for me, knowing you personally through this process, is that you understood that. You understood that. Look, it was almost born out of frustration that, we've got all this great policy, but nobody's doing anything. But you understood that you went out and had a crack, and then that led on to the knock-on effect of making Toowoomba the great place it is now downtown.
It was very intentional.
Yeah.
There was definite planning motivations behind doing it.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, we were young and we wanted to start a business, but the primary motivation and the spark was born of a planning desire, which was trying to achieve a good outcome in a way that I wasn't currently being able to do through the policy document.
And getting back to the name Ground Up, and you've talked about community action. I mean, that's really, it's delightful because ground up coffee, but it's really the name tells the story here, doesn't it? This place was built from the ground up.
Again, that was intentional.
Yeah.
It was about trying to capture that this was a grassroots action and a play on words, ground up coffee, of course.
Yeah.
But that was the intention from the beginning.
Yeah. So I think we're not sitting here sort of trying to convince everyone in the audience to go out and start a cafe exactly. But I think the kind of dots we're trying to connect here are really about once you understand your planning intention, how do you create the circumstances that the actors you need in the private sector will respond? And that's the key piece here, I think, from a planning perspective.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah.
How do you get implementation that works, that's low risk, that you can pilot and try and see if it actually achieves the outcomes you're aiming for? I think there's some lessons in there.
Yeah, and the other interesting for me is here you are, bright-eyed straight out of uni, and we all come out with great ambitions and going to change the world, and I think that's important because that's who we as a profession are. We're a public interest profession. Our aim is to make the world a better place and each make our own small contribution to doing that. But it was born out of the frustration of not seeing the results of that you did this. Yeah. So there's sort of like this tension between, I'm going to do great things, and oh, well, this is not working by itself. I better go and do something else.
Yeah. I was very impatient though.
Yeah. Would you describe yourself as still impatient?
Yeah, very impatient.
Well, it just goes to show, impatience is not a bad thing. And I'm aware too, as you kind of spread your entrepreneurial wings once this place was up and running to Baker's Duck, I think was the other business that they were providing you with a lot of your pastries and things at that point. Is that right? And then you started to get invested in them. So
yep.
Yeah.
Basically, yep, that's right.
Yeah.
So I kind of learnt a lot of lessons doing this one, and one of the lessons I learnt was that if you bring energy to an underutilized space, you can create a lot of value, not just community value, but also economic value.
Yes. Yeah.
And so immediately my next thought was, how can I capitalize on that? How can I find another area that is underutilized and try and create lots of value?
Yep.
And at that time, this was 2018, so it was 5 years after starting this place. A lot of the laneway revitalisation had occurred in that sort of timeline, and so I started thinking outside of the centre of town to more of the fringe areas.
Yep.
And there are a lot, and there still are a lot of places in Toowoomba, fringe areas, where there are these old corner corner stores that used to be maybe the milk bar or something.
Yeah, or general store.
Or
Yeah,
general store,
yeah.
And even now, a lot of them are still kind of dead. But yeah, we found one of those, and I thought, this is another great opportunity. Let's do it. And I think putting a baker's duck in that location has drawn a lot of the energy down to that part of town.
Right.
And it's basically the concept was proved here, and then we replicated it.
Yeah, it's a great story. I think that's thanks so much for your time and sharing your knowledge and your experience and the journey, Jay. It's been fantastic for me to fill in some gaps in my knowledge about it all. But I reckon, what do you say we go and have a cup of coffee?
Yeah, let's go.
Well deserved.